Top 5 last chance QBs. These are guys who have made their way to the transfer portal, some 3 times, one 4 times, one 2 times, but that are on the spot where it has to work out for them because either their eligibility is up or even if they had another year after this one, if this year doesn't work out, then they're probably going to be a backup.
Can they walk and chew gum?
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Number 5, JT Daniels, who's at Rice now, and this would be his 4th school after USC, Georgia, West Virginia, and good for him that he's going to get the kind of academic, push at Rice that's there, but he's been trying to make it work a lot of places and just has never kind of broken through that ceiling and has become, unfortunately for him, what they call in the pros kind of just a guy. And, I hope it works out for Rice and that they make a bowl game with JT Daniels. But this is one of those things, and the new transfer rules might be pointed directly at him because he's been to 4 schools in 5 or 6 years now, and it just never worked out for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's been all over the place. As you mentioned, Southern Cal, Rice, stops with Georgia and West Virginia in between. I mean, he's been in the SEC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, and what is Rice in CUSA, I think. I haven't checked in a while.
You know what? If I had to take a quiz on where everybody is now with the new additions elsewhere, I would absolutely struggle with it.
Like, are they in the American soon? Like, because now, everybody's onloading, offloading. Remember, I really, just off the top of my head, don't recall exactly where they are at the moment. But, yeah, I mean, he's been in 3 of the Power 5s. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. So, yeah, at some point, time runs out, and like you said, Paul, he'll get a great education at Rice. Hopefully his schoolwork up to this point. I mean, to get in, he had to have at least been doing his schoolwork. But, great academic opportunity. And, it's like you said, it's your last chance. So we'll see what he does with it. But they were borderline a bowl team last year, and they've made some changes. And, I'm sure they're looking around, too. As an academic institution, maybe they're not that bothered by it. When they're looking around and they're seeing, like, Tulane and schools like that getting mentioned for Pac-12 membership, and Houston's joining the Big 12. And not that Rice has really ever been a power of any sort, but,
many years ago,
their focus is academics.
Many,
and so that's understandable. But had athletics been a little bit, more consistent or successful on the way, like, could their story have been a little bit different? I don't know.
Wait a minute. Are both of those JT Daniels?
Well, one of them, I think, is the mirror image.
Because the one on the left looks like a quarterback. The one on the right looks like it could be
a deep snapper.
It's mirror image.
Like just like waiting.
A tight end.
Yeah.
Well, that's him. It's just a flipped image. Yeah.
Number 4, Emory Jones at Cincinnati. I'm very curious to see if Scott Satterfield finds what Florida and Arizona State both couldn't find in Emory Jones. Now, a lot of the knocks on Arizona State was they did not use his athleticism very well. Of course, they didn't do anything very well the last couple of years, but I'm curious to see what happens here with Emory Jones, and obviously he's out of eligibility, but didn't work at Florida, didn't work out at Arizona State, and then Cincinnati was in a situation where they just wanted a walk and chew gum guy, which is what Emory Jones has been so far in his career and just hasn't broken through. This is the reason I have Cincinnati at the bottom of the league. I just think that we've seen what Emory Jones is. It's not like this guy's a sophomore that hasn't broken through yet. He's been now at 3 places, but this is, last stop for him as well.
Was he the one you compared to Vince Young?
No, Anthony Richardson was the one.
Okay, the one
that's
the NFL.
The one that sent him off to Arizona State was.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Because he had those. Look, if you watch Anthony Richardson, he had those moments at Florida where you're like, oh, I haven't seen anybody do that since Vince Young, and then, he had moments where he just didn't look like he was there at all. So, but no, Emory Jones just was, and he was a walking pick 6 at Florida for sure. I mean, that's why he lost his job. So we'll see if that changes in the Big 12.
He's a player with a skill set that's obviously been desirable to multiple teams at this point. I don't think that Scott Satterfield's a complete moron when it comes to picking quarterbacks, but I don't know how many other options that he had. It would have been interesting to see how they eventually landed on Emory Jones, but Ben Bryant decides to leave, that kind of threw them for a loop. So they did what they could, and he's going to be the guy. And I'm think that really their season will probably depend greatly on whatever he ends up doing, because I don't know if they're so strong in another. It's a weird year for Cincinnati, just with losing Fickle, and I just don't know what to expect. It's not even so much joining the Big 12. It's just in general, they have a lot of questions. They put a lot of guys in the pros over the last 2 years. I mean, Luca had turned that into a factory, and Sauce Gardner amongst others. So yeah, very interesting time for them, at a pivotal time for them, and. If it goes as it has gone with Emory Jones, then they're probably not going to win a ton of games, but maybe he can help stem the tide, or maybe he can surprise, and provide some stability there.
Number 3, Kedon Slovis at BYU. This is one I think that there's a maybe bit of a higher ceiling for, just because I trust what Kalani Sitake is going to do on offense there, but again, there's a lot going on. This is his third stop, USC, Pitt, and now BYU. USC seems to have a lot of these. But they, this is, they're hoping it works out. And BYU, who usually has, at their best times, has a nice, row of quarterbacks where one guy leaves and the other guy steps in, and now you lose Jaron Hall off to the NFL, and you kind of find yourself in a spot where it's go get a transfer or put it up to a guy who is almost no experience at all. So this, I believe, was the better of the options, but even still, hasn't worked out at 2 spots for Slovis.
Yeah, he just hasn't been very good. As far as like when we last saw him at Pitt last year, fine to bad. Honestly, at USC, it was very up and down. He throws a lot of picks, and typically the last couple of times we've seen him, those have been almost exactly as the same number of touchdowns he's throwing, which is never a good thing to be kind of 50-50-ish like that.
Strikeouts to walks. You never want the walks to be even.
And that's not how his career started off. He started off with a bang, which is why I think we're still talking about him all these years later, was the way that it popped off at USC back in 2019. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have to get better protecting the football and just get better in general. Not a bad option to pivot to when you lose a guy like Jaron Hall, as you mentioned. But, yeah, certainly enough questions to not feel like, all right, boom, they're not going to miss a beat. They're just going to move on along. And that's not even taking into account some of the talent they lost around Jaron Hall, like a Puka Nacua, for example, even if they did have to play without him quite a bit. But, yeah, I mean, he's got a great opportunity. To make a big splash in their first year, but I don't know, a little bit of too much unknown about him at the moment.
Yeah, Puka Nacua, by the way, the Rams, a lot of the Rams people are talking about how much they think
really
he'll fit with Sean McVay there, by the way, which doesn't surprise me. I think he's one of those guys who can probably be a really good NFL player if he stays healthy for a while.
And they still won 8 games last year. I mean, even though it didn't feel like they probably did, or maybe it does, but to me, I don't know. I kind of walked away thinking that they had a bad year. Maybe 8 was a disappointment because of what you had coming back, but yeah, they still won 8 games. Yeah. So
number 2, Casey Thompson at FAU, and out of Nebraska into FAU after his run at Texas as well. Back with Tom Herman. I think it'll probably work out well for him there. Knows the system, knows Tom Herman, all of that. It just, I don't think I would have ever pegged this guy to be a journeyman at first. I thought he was going to have a much better career arc than he has.
But he has. Man, he's put up some numbers.
He's put up, and it just hasn't worked out. Now, he's going to play with Tom Herman, who you could argue was the reason his career didn't start out well, because Tom Herman's offense was not consistently productive because of the fact that everything runs through the quarterback, completely, and not,
through the quarterback completely. You're talking about the run game
through the quarterback, as opposed to using the other athletes you have in the field. And then when you have a rough day as a quarterback, you have no other options because he got so myopic there. But I think this will work out fine. But he is maybe the biggest surprise on this list to me, as a guy who just did not work out at 2 spots. And Nebraska, just got caught up in a coaching change, and they wanted more competition and brought in who I'll tell you is the next. No,
they didn't. Matt Rule handpicked Sims, to come be his quarterback, and Casey Thompson. That was just a matter of time, but he also couldn't go through spring, and so that didn't help him any.
Yeah,
I always have thought he's a pretty good quarterback. Can he lead you to a championship? I don't know, but I guess the history says no. But I've always thought this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a bad quarterback by any means. I think he can probably win a lot of games at Florida Atlantic, and Tom Herman should be a great fit. That little reunion of sorts should be, totally unforeseen. Them ended up in Boca Raton together, but I think it'll benefit both guys to give Herman a solid quarterback to start his tenure off with. But yeah, I mean, you talk about Thompson maybe running too much, which would have been year 3 with Texas because he didn't play a ton of the years prior to that. But he didn't do any of the sort at Nebraska. I mean, maybe that was a sack yardage actually that just eliminated his rushing yards.
He got beat
that probably
up
was
quite a
some of
bit.
it. Yeah. But yeah, he was not. As much of that as you might have thought at Nebraska. That could be for a variety of reasons.
And
but
also
yeah,
been who's around him at Nebraska.
No, absolutely. But, I think he's a good player, and he should be great at FAU.
Yep. Number 1, Jeff Sims at Nebraska.
You're a hater.
He was a very highly rated recruit, and he went to Georgia Tech, who – he had to fight through injuries and all that. And now he's with a staff that I know was probably in on – recruiting him, and Jeff Collins was the coach that signed him at Georgia Tech, and Matt Rule knows Jeff Collins really well because of their time at Temple together, so I'm sure there's a lot of overlap there. And Jeff Sims had his moments, but like most of Georgia Tech would have these times where it's like, oh, look, they're in a 3-game winning streak, and then they've got, Clemson and NC State and Virginia back-to-back or something like that, and they lose 3 games in a row. It just didn't work out for them. So, but Jeff Sims, to me, is one of the more intriguing guys in the country, and in the right system, with the right talent around him, can probably win some games. But this is, and Matt Rule knows this, but a jump from playing sporadically at Georgia Tech to being a starting quarterback in the Big Ten. Yeah. It's going to be a jump for Jeff Sims.
I watched the spring game. I'm not a big spring game guy. Heck, when I go to watch Baylor, I can't remember what I watched, but he seems to have kind of a little bit of that, what you want as your guy if he can stay healthy. He takes a lot of hits. He's a bigger body, but, I have not really seen him consistently enough. But Rule watched him. He was at Carolina, paid attention to him, handpicked him, and we'll see.
He's got a big arm. They're going to run pro-style offense. That should suit him well. I think he just really needs to cut down on turnovers. And I know that could really probably be a golden rule for every quarterback, but sometimes you do have to, mention that because that's part of the problem is you got a guy with a lot of turnovers. So, yeah, cut down on the picks and, big arm, presence and experience. And I think that, if you're somebody going into a program that's got big expectations, not that they're thinking they're going to win the Big Ten anytime soon, but obviously there's expectations that you're there to change it. You could definitely do far worse as far as bringing in a guy than Jeff Sims as your first big quarterback recruit. So, yeah, I think that was a good move by Rule and should work out well, but we will see.
Wish that receiver was back who had a really good year.
Trey
LSU.
Palmer.
Yeah, he was fantastic. He ended up having a really, really good year for a team that was very anemic for the most part. That would be nice to have him back. All right, Graham Bronstein,